Which brings me to the last barriers we're trying to remove, and those are outdated and unnecessary regulations. I've ordered a government-wide review. And if there are rules on the books that are needlessly stifling job creation and economic growth, we will fix them. Already we're dramatically cutting down on the paperwork that saddles businesses with huge administrative costs. We're improving the way FDA evaluates things like medical devices. To get innovative and life-saving treatments to market faster. And the EPA, based on the need for further scientific analysis. Delayed the greenhouse gas permitting rules for biomass. I've also ordered agencies to find ways to make regulations more flexible for small businesses. And we've turned a tangle of fuel economy regulations and pending lawsuits into a single standard that will reduce our dependence on foreign oil. Save consumers money at the pump and give car companies the certainty. That they need all negotiated by the various stakeholders without the need for congressional legislation. But ultimately, winning the future is not just about what the government can do for you to succeed. It's also about what you can do to help America succeed. So we were just talking about regulations. Even as we eliminate burdensome regulations, America's businesses have a responsibility as well to recognize that there are some basic safeguards. Some basic standards that are necessary to protect the American people. From harm or exploitation. Not every regulation is bad. Not every regulation is burdensome on business. A lot of the regulations that are out there are things that all of us welcome in our lives. Few of us would want to live in a society without rules that keep our air and water clean. That give consumers the confidence to do everything from investing in financial markets to buying groceries. And the fact is, when standards like these have been proposed in the past, opponents have often warned that they would be an assault on business and free enterprise. We can look at the history in this country. Early drug companies argued the bill creating the FDA would practically destroy the sale of remedies. In the United States, that didn't happen. Auto executives predicted that having to install seat belts would bring the downfall of their industry. It didn't happen. The president of the American Bar, Association denounced child labor laws as a communistic effort to nationalize children. That's a quote. None of these things came to pass. In fact, companies adapt and standards often spark competition and innovation. I was traveling when I went up to Penn State to look at some clean energy hubs that have been set up. I was with Steve Chu, my Secretary of Energy. And he won a Nobel Prize in Physics. So when you're in conversations with him you catch about 1 out of every 4 things he says. But he started talking about energy efficiency and about refrigerators. And he pointed out that the government set modest targets a couple decades ago to start increasing efficiency over time. They were well thought through, they weren't radical. companies competed to hit these markers. And they hit them every time, and then exceeded them. And as a result, a typical fridge now costs half as much and uses a quarter of. The energy that it once did, and you don't have to defrost. Chipping at that stuff and then putting the warm water inside the freezer and all that stuff. It saves families and businesses billions of dollars. So regulations didn't destroy the industry. It enhanced it, and it made our lives better if they're smart, if they're well designed. And that's our goal, is to work with you to think through how do we design necessary regulations. In a smart way, and get rid of regulations that have outlived their usefulness, or don't work. I also have to point out the perils of too much regulation are also matched by the dangers of too little. And we saw that in the financial crisis. Where the absence of sound rules of the road, that wasn't good for business. Even if you weren't in the financial sector, it wasn't good for business. And that's why, with the help of Paul Volcker, who is here today, we passed a set of common sense reforms. The same can be said of health insurance reform. We simply could not continue to accept a status quo that's made our entire economy less competitive. As we paid more per person for health care than any other nation on earth. Nobody. Is even close. And we couldn't accept a broken system where insurance companies could drop people because they got sick. Or families went into bankruptcy because of medical bills. I know that folks here have concerns about this law. And I understand it. If you're running a business right now and you're seeing these escalating healthcare costs, your instinct is, if I've got even more laws on top of me, that's going to increase my costs even more. I understand that suspicion, that skepticism. But the nonpartisan congressional watchdogs at the CBO estimate that healthcare tax credits will be worth nearly $40 billion for small businesses over the next decade. $40 billion. 'Directly to small businesses who are doing the right thing by their employees. And experts not just from the government, but also those commissioned by the business. Roundtable suggests that health insurance reform could ultimately save large employers anywhere from $2,000 to $3. $0.000 per family, your employees and your bottom line. I've said in the State of the Union and I'll repeat here today. I am willing and happy to look at other ideas to improve the law, including incentives to improve patient safety and medical. Malpractice reforms. And I want to correct a flaw that's already placed in unnecessary. Bookkeeping burden on too many small businesses, and I appreciate the Chamber's help in doing that. But we have to recognize that some common sense regulations often will make sense for your businesses. As well as your families, as well as your neighbors, as well as your co-workers. Of course, your responsibility goes beyond recognizing the need for certain standards and safeguards. If we're fighting to reform the tax code and increase exports to help you compete, The benefits can't just translate into greater profits and bonuses for those at the top. They have to be shared by American workers, who need to know that expanding trade and opening markets will lift their standards of living as well as your bottom line. We can't go back to the kind of economy and culture that we saw in the years leading up to the recession. Where growth and gains in productivity just didn't translate into rising incomes and opportunity for the middle class. That's not something necessarily we can legislate. But it's something that all of us have to take responsibility for thinking about. How do we make sure that everybody's got a stake in trade? Everybody's got a stake in increasing exports, everybody's got a stake in rising productivity. Because ordinary folks end up seeing their standards of living rise as well. That's always been the American promise. That's what JFK meant when he said, "A rising tide lifts all boats." Too many boats have been left behind, stuck in the mud. And if we as a nation are going to invest in innovation, that innovation should lead to new jobs and manufacturing on our shores. The end result of tax breaks and investments can't simply be that new breakthroughs and technologies are discovered here in America, but then the manufacturing takes place overseas. That, too, breaks the social compact. It makes people feel as if the game is fixed and they're not. Benefiting from the extraordinary discoveries that take place here. So the key to our success has never been just developing new ideas, it's also been making new products. So Intel pioneers the microchip, then puts thousands to work building them in Silicon Valley. Henry Ford perfects the assembly line, and then puts a generation to work in the factories of Detroit. That's how we built the largest middle class in the world. Those folks working in those plants, they go out and they buy a Ford. They buy a personal computer. And the economy grows for everyone. And that's how we'll create the base of knowledge and skills that propel the next inventions and the next ideas. Right now, businesses across this country are proving that America can compete. Caterpillar is opening a new plant to build excavators in Texas that used to be shipped from Japan. In Tennessee, Whirlpool is opening their first new U.S. factory in more than a decade. Dow is building a new plant in Michigan to manufacture batteries for electric vehicles. A company called Geomagic, a software maker, decided to close down its overseas centers in China and Europe and move their R&D here to the United States. These companies are bringing jobs back to our shores. And that's good for everybody. So if I've got one message, my message is now is the time to invest in America. Now is the time to invest in America. Today, American companies have nearly $2 trillion sitting on their balance sheets. And I know that many of you have told me that you're waiting for demand to rise before you get off the sidelines and expand, and that with millions of Americans out of work. Demand has risen more slowly than any of us would like.